Hello, it's me, and I've had a lot of requests to look at, demonstrate, and do a little tutorial on this little guy here. This is the 3x3 Camouflage Cube by Whit Eden. You see that over there. Now, this is kind of like the mix-up in that I will take a puzzle that's the start of a series, and I'll just kind of look at it, review it, see if I want to continue on with it. Some puzzles I want to finish the entire series, some I'm satisfied with one or two, so this is one of those where I just wanted to try it out, and it's actually really a fun puzzle. At the surface, it looks like just a very strange looking 3x3, but it becomes very quick, but you very quickly realize it turns in very strange ways. So at first I thought, well, maybe this is like an offset puzzle, like the 3x3x5 I-cube or something like that, where it looks like a 3x3x4, but it's actually not like that. What this actually is, the way that it's turning, the way that it's moving, and the shape shifting that happens right away, this actually is called a camouflage cube because it's a camouflaged 4x4x4 with variable bandaging. The best way to demonstrate what's going on, so if you were to take a look at this AI cube, you can see the bandaging quite readily because it's still proportioned correctly. So here's your 2x2x2 segment, the way it should be. This is a bandage of a 2x2x2 segment. So the solve of this, of course, means, or the scramble of this means you take it to here, and then you have that very interesting and challenging AI scramble that you have. Imagine that one of these, just one of these, is like a 2x2x2 bandage altogether. That would mean that the one next to it is also a 2x2x2 bandage, but it's not consistent of one corner. It's actually consistent of a corner, and they threw in variable bandagings of a center and an edge to make it look like one edge piece. This may be a corner here, this may be an edge here, and a center. And then over here, it might be a center and an edge. So what they did is they took a tiny little 4x4, put plastic sheets over it, built it out, and made it look once again like a 3x3. But in reality, you are consistent of 2x2x2 blocks. One of these is one of these. One of these is an actual 2x2x2 block. The others have it variably in there. So here's what I mean. Let's say this is your 2x2x2 block that's set together. This here, collectively between this piece and this piece, may be a 2x2x2 block, which means you'd have a corner, an edge, a center, an edge, and just maybe a center over here. But you use plastic sheets to kind of build it out. So the key here is find which one of these is your actual fully bandaged 2x2x2 corner piece. That corner piece is a 2x2x2 that has within it a center, an edge, a corner, and an edge, and on the other side a center and an edge. So to find out which one it is, and believe it or not, you don't actually have to find it right away, but I'll take, say, a side here and I'll just turn it, and I'll find which one doesn't really rotate, just turns about the axis but doesn't move. This one here you can see translates all the way down to here, but this piece doesn't really seem to move. Now the one that's the fully bandaged 2x2x2 segment is like that on all of its faces. So we turn it over here and we see, up, it moves. So it's not this piece. Well, let's stick over here. What about this piece over here? Well, this isn't really moving. It's just rotating about a center point. Over here, when I do it, same thing. It's not moving. It's just rotating about a center point. Over here on this face, same thing. What that tells me is that this piece here consists of center pieces on all sides. Because it doesn't rotate on all axes, it basically stays here, it rotates, but because it doesn't translate around, it must consist of a centerpiece inside of it, which is why it has to stay about an axis of rotation on each side. None of the others do that. I can turn it over here and see that this doesn't rotate, but on this side it does. And that's because over here this must be a centerpiece, but on this side perhaps this is the centerpiece or this is the centerpiece, but not here, so it's got to travel far away. Now, I only demonstrate that because that will have use later, but you don't really have to understand that now. And again, the way that I like to do these puzzles is it doesn't require any memorizing or hyper-familiarity with the structure of the puzzle. We can solve it just fine if we didn't even know that, but there is one piece that does that, and we're going to use that to kind of coordinate things. Now, I'll tell you what the strategy of this puzzle is going to be is you're going to go ahead and fill in all of your 2x2x2 blocks, one of which will already be done for you on one side, and then you're going to put in 2x2x2 blocks on the top side, but it's going to be even easier than the AI cube because you don't have to do it segment by segment. Much of the segments will already be in for you. So that's what we're going to do. Now, without memorizing anything else, let's go ahead and see what the scramble looks like. So here's a turn that actually doesn't take me out through here, and I'm going to try to scramble it to where I've taken out the bandaging as much as possible to enhance the strategy. As I'm scrambling this, I want to point out something to you as well, that as I'm doing this, and the way that I'm scrambling this, is it's actually separating itself out into, it's become a 2x2x2. So I'm only scrambling it across the center here. Across the center point. So as I'm doing this, you can kind of get a feel for which pieces have what aspects of bandaging. See this block over here? This is fully mobile and fully isolated within my 2x2x2 scramble. So even if you didn't memorize that this was the block that was my reduced 2x2x2 block, you could figure it out because I'm just doing 2x2 moves and it's completely isolated. You can't say that about this. This is always in association with this guy here. So I'll do a move here, move here, move here. So these two are together. So this actually represents a fully reduced 2x2x2 block. What about this? Well, same thing with this guy. How about this? Well, this is moving and taking this with it too. So this is part of it. This isn't the correct one, but this is part of it. Now you can see that this doesn't look like much of a challenge, so I'm actually going to do a couple of maneuvers to try to enhance the scramble of this a little bit more. The way that I'm doing that is I'm doing RIDI, RD moves to place these in alignment here. Now this won't let it move because it's blocked, so I'm going to move this upside here. All right, DIRD. So to get a full challenge of this, I'm doing these RIDI-RD moves, DIRD, so that I can cause a scramble. Now this piece is going to block it. It's part of this 2x2x2 segment. So I'm going to RIDI-RD this until, and eventually it'll get there. RD, RIDI-RD. So now that I've done that, I can do one of these moves. And by doing that, I'm separating out from here. This move here is basically moving just a top and an edge, but separating it out from the center. Very nice. Yeah. Getting prepared for Halloween, I see. So I've separated these out over here, and I'm going to do the same thing here just to enhance the scramble. So I'm going to put this over here, and I'm going to go ahead and let's put this guy in over here, and then we'll turn this one upside down. RIDI-RD, and turn this leg. So I'm doing this so that I can enhance the scramble, so that when describing how to solve this, I can make it make more sense. So I'm basically moving others. I moved this one out of alignment here. RIDI-RD. So now I can move these out of alignment, but I got to make sure I don't want to put that one back in. Now what about this? I want to move this out of alignment. DIRD. Now it's not going to do that with this. As long as this is here, it's going to intersect with that. But what I can do is move this here, but that's going to intersect with this here too. So that was pretty good. I'm starting to move these a little bit more out of alignment with each other. But again, my motions, my movements are pretty limited to 2x2x2 scramble. So as I'm moving this around, I'm really doing the equivalent of this. It's easier to see the 2x2 segments, but really it's a matter of skewing your perspective. So don't memorize anything, just turn it around. I'm going to do more like that to enhance the challenge. For instance, I'd like to separate these out from each other. As long as I have this here, I'm not going to be able to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue this process of separating these out as much as possible to enhance the scramble and enhance the challenge of the solve. So, abracadabra. Okay, now what you see here is actually probably one of the more complete scrambles of this puzzle that you're going to get. I actually worked pretty hard to try to separate all the components out. So this is about as scrambled a 3x3 camouflage cube as you're going to have. So let's start off with this. Let's say you have this sitting on your shelf, you bought it, and you didn't want to scramble it quite yet because you weren't sure about the perspective, but say your kid took it off the shelf and started scrambling it. Next thing you know, you have a scrambled puzzle. So we're going to pick it up right from that and see how we're going to solve it. Well, knowing that I'm going to try to put 2x2x2 segments together, I think I had a couple more by 2s than I needed. Let's find the one piece that's actually already scrambled that's already bandaged as a 2x2x2. What I'm going to do is move this. Chances are I can only move it as a 2x2, and I'm going to find the block that is isolated with every movement, and it's this. So you can see, oh, it matches up with here, but not really, because with my 2x2 scramble, it's pretty isolated. You can see this over here. This is in conjunction with these pieces here. So this needs all of these to be called a reduced 2x2x2. Some of them just needs another wedge, like this guy here. Some of them needs a wedge in the center. Some of them need all of them. So basically, once I've found that piece, this is where I'm going to base everything on. And this will be the bottom area. And the bottom color, I'm going to say, is going to be blue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now assemble all of my blue containing 2x2x2 segments. Just like I did over here, just like I did over here when I did the parity-free solve, as you recall, I was putting in 2x2x2 segments. So what I'm going to want next is I see a blue and orange. The one that goes right next to it is going to be a blue and orange. So where is the corner with the blue and orange? You can see a blue and orange over here. So this is going to be a combination of a centerpiece, and you can actually see all of these are true sides. And if you look at it like that, we've got center, 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 center. So this is rotating about the axis of these centers. Everything else, this center is bonded with this edge. These are edges here. This is just an extension that's been glued onto this to make it look more like a cube. Over here, center, 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 center. Here, center, 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 center. Here, center, 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 center. Every so often you might actually get one with no actual looking centers, but the centers are all buried within here with variable extensions. So you can actually see it a little bit more clear in a scrambled state because you're not led to believe there's just one center. You can see that there's actually four. These two are obvious here, and this is these two have edges glued onto it. All right, so with that said, let's find it again. It's not this one. Is it this one? And it's this one. Or is it? Nope, it's not this one because these are being dragged with it. So like I say, I don't generally memorize these things. It's easy enough to figure out. Why waste brain capacity by doing that? But I was looking for the blue and orange. So let's find a blue and orange. Here's a blue and orange. So this is going to belong down here. And let's see what has to go with it. What has to go with it is going to be another blue and orange wedge. Now, even if you didn't know that, you can look around and try to find another blue and orange, which is here. So this has to come in contact with this. This is going to be my solve side. This is going to be my non-solved side, my workspace, so to speak. So let's move this up here and move it up here. Okay, so let's take this, and in true AI style, this has now become part of this 2x2x2 block collectively. This is part of this 2x2x2 block. So I'm going to take this and move it down to the side. And I'm going to do that by taking this 2x2 block and going R-I-D-I-R-D, R-I-D-I-R-D. It's not there yet, so we do it again. R-I-D-I-R-D, R-I-D-I-R-D. All right, Spider Patrol. Okay, the spider has been successfully vanquished. Now that I have that, this is where I want it to be. Now I want to take this and move this top side. Remember, this is just riding above these. This is part of its 2x2 segment. So I'm going to move this to the top so that this can come here. So move this to the top so it can come over here. So we'll go R-I-D-I-R-D, R-I-D-I-R-D. So this can join with this over here. Now sometimes what happens is that this will block it too. Just keep R-I-D-I-R-D'ing all segments until you can free it up. Move this over here and bang, this is where it needs to be. Now is this all that needs to happen? So as I move this 2x2 segment, I can now isolate these pieces. Nothing else goes here. So once I've done that, I can move this down to here, back into my workspace. Now just to demonstrate, Actually, I'm going to say this is the bottom. I can move this here, and you can. This demonstrates that this is where it's supposed to be. So this represents one 2 by 2 by 2 by 2 block. This collectively, these two pieces represent a 2 by 2 by 2 block. So we continue. You can see a couple pieces happen to accidentally be in, but don't worry about that, because what I want to do now is I want to put the one with the blue and yellow. There's a blue and yellow here, but I'm going to want to move this top side to join with this blue and yellow here. So that's what I'm going to do. This belongs up here. As it's up here, I need to move this down in the center so it can slide in with this one. So R-I-D-I-R-D, R-I-D-I-R-D. Now, in doing so, it's going to mess the orientation of these two. It doesn't matter. I only put that in to demonstrate where it's supposed to be. This is supposed to slide into here. So I'm going to R-I-D-I-R-D this until it finds its way to here. In the meantime, this represents a corner piece. I can move this here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to still try to move in conjunction with this guy. So I'm going to go R-I-D-I-R-D, R-I-D-I-R-D. Okay, do it again. R-I-D-I-R-D, R-I-D-I-R-D. This one might be the hardest to visualize, but I can move this here. This is in over here. Once I put that in, as is the style of an AI puzzle, we're now going to want to move this top side, just like we did when we got, say, 2 over here, move it to the top. I put a corner and a edge. This is the equivalent of doing a corner and an edge. I just so happen to have the center and the edge here already rolled in with this. So let's move this to the top, and that way it'll keep these together. This happened to come in, but we're not there yet, so R-I-D-I-R-D, R-I-D-I-R-D, and again, R-I-D-I-R-D, R-I-D-I-R-D. So basically these two are now moving together. What I want to do now is to finish this segment here, I need a wedge with a red and a blue, and then I need the blue center also. So here's the blue center. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find the wedge that's red and blue and match it up with this. So where's my red and blue wedge? It might actually be down here. And the red and blue wedge is indeed right over here. So I've got to move this up so that this blue can match with this blue center as opposed to this. So let's go ahead and do R-I-D-I-R-D. This R-I-D-I-R-D business is just reorienting things. So this can now come to here. But we have a little problem. This is blocking it. This is acting as a block. So I need to actually separate this out from here. So I'm not going to be able to do any moving of this until I separate it out from here. So I have a quest within a quest. R-I-D-I-R-D, R-I-D-I-R-D. And again, just to reorient things, and by doing this I'm not messing up what I already have on the bottom here and here. So now I need to move this away from here, keeping in mind that we're working on this. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to take this and move it away from here because it's blocking this center. So I'm going to move it like so, and this will work. Forget about the fact that this is in. This will work because now I can move this out from this center because I have a line through here. And that was really the only quest that I had. So as such, what I'm going to now do is bring this up so that I can move it through here, and I can take this blue and try to find the blue center over here. But I can see that I might run into trouble because anything that blocks this move is going to be a problem, which is this. So now in addition, I have to move it away from this guy. So let's go ahead and do that where I have this sliding down on the bottom. So in other words, this comes down here, so I can separate that out, this out from here. So R-I-D-I-R-D, R-I-D-I-R-D. So normally this should be able to move, except it's got to be separated from this guy here. R-I-D-I-R-D, R-I-D-I-R-D. And not yet. R-I-D-I-R-D, R-I-D-I-R-D. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I have to move this out from here because this is always going to block this. So this actually turned into a pretty good scramble over here. Now, it might behoove me, because if I turn this over here, this is in, but I have a situation where everything is in except for this blue. So what I might want to do is, because I'm having a hard time separating this out, I can't move it over here because that's going to be blocked over here, is maybe make this what where I need it to be. This the 1 by 2 by 2 bar, so to speak. Move this top side and try to match this to the blue center, which is over here. So that's something I could do, or alternatively, I can, since these two are in, I can take one of these guys and maybe move it up. So let's say I move this up like so over here. I haven't touched these over here, I've just got these two in, but I did manage to move something different other than this. So if I move this over here, then I can maybe use this, or even this one over here. So this might be a little bit easier for me to deal with. We'll go RI. Let's go ahead and move this down so that this can be floating on top of here. RI, DI, RD, RI, DI, RD. Now understand, with this scramble, I actually worked pretty hard to make this a fairly complete scramble. All right, so let's see what we've got. Something's blocking this. This is blocking this over here. RI, DI, RD, RI, DI, RD. And if you do it enough times, you're eventually going to find something that can move. Okay, so this can move here. So let's kind of reorient ourselves here. This is a corner that's already in. I'm going to move this out here. And now what I have is a situation, if I move this up, is this going to be blocked in this direction? And the answer is no, it's not. So I just reconfigured things. I want to get this blue up here by itself so that I can move it around to line up with a blue center over here. Now it just so happens that this blue center, I have to move up to here because it's not where it's supposed to be. This has to come up to here. These are still down on the bottom side, but I need to move this one top side. So what I can do is just move it up like this. RI, DI, RD, RI, DI, RD. So now this is up here. It's being prevented to move from this guy with this guy, so I'm just going to go RI, DI, RD, DI, RD. So this can move freely. And now all I have to do is take this and move this one up to here so it can latch to this one here. See if it works. RI, DI, RD, RI, DI, RD. Now, like I say, your particular puzzle might not be this far out. So this does move freely, but it's not in proper alignment with this piece over here. Just make sure I'm okay here. Yeah, okay. So this has to actually come down to over here. But the question is, am I going to be able to move it? So if I turn this to where this is over here, am I going to be blocked? Well, let's find out. RI, DI, RD, RI, DI, RD. So now this is here and we're not blocked. So what I can do is move this over here like so. So now I have this lined up and this whole thing is in over here. So I've got a center, edge, and the center is actually buried in here. Remember, it's one of these four make up the center. So now I'm going to take this and I'm going to move it to the bottom over here so it can line up with this, my blue and red. This blue and red should be able to line up with it. RI, DI, RD, RI, DI, RD. So you get very adept at doing this. So now I just move it into here and bang. I've now got this one solved. So you can see in terms of my 1x2 bars, this is where it needs to be over here. So I'm just going to move this down to here. So the ones that I have in, if I were to keep kind of keep track of everything, I've got this one, which is its own. I've got this one actually, which is its own 2x2x2 bar. I've got these two collectively, which are 2 by 2 by 2 bars, and now I've got this, which is a 2 by 2 by 2 bar. So what I'm going to do, now this one belongs somewhere, but, well actually this one belongs somewhere, but it's not a fully reduced 2 by 2 by 2 bar yet. So I can just move this down. I can just move this down to here. Now what I'm going to do you don't have to do this at this point, but I'm going to put in everything that is in the proper place with each other just to show you how well they match. So this comes over to here. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to move this down to here. So this is going to end up, well, what 1 by 2 by 2 bar does this belong to? This is going to belong actually over here. This belongs here because it's blue and yellow next to this blue and yellow here. So I'm going to go turn, turn, turn. Now this is just to show what we're building here. And now don't get confused. This is a 2 by 2 by 2 bar here. This is a 2 by 2 by 2 bar here. And this collectively, with this corner piece, edge, edge, and center, this collectively is a 2 by 2 bar. 2 by 2 by 2 by 2 bar. So these are my 2 by 2 moves. And each one of these represents one of these guys. So now I have to do the final one, and the final one is going to have blue and white. Well, here's the blue and white here, so I have to figure out what does this go with. Well, you can see by the movement here, it's going to take these two guys over here. So I'm going to match it up with this blue and white over here. So I'm going to do RI, DI, RDs until this comes in the proper orientation to match with this. This is also going to have to come down. So RI, DI, RD, RI, DI, RD. All right, this still isn't going to be able to move. These have to be down here, and this has to be up here. This has to be floating on top of these to become the 1 by 2 by 2 bar up here. So we have RI, DI, RD, RI, DI, RD. So now notice, this should be able to turn by itself. Not dragging the entire 2 by 2 by 2 portion, but just this portion up here. So if I were to show it over here, it wouldn't be this entire portion, just the top layer. So this represents being able to move in the top layer, but I have to put it in conjunction with this. So this has to be floated upside down. RI, DI, RD, RI, DI, RD, and keep doing that. And don't worry about what's happening at the bottom. They're still in. These 2 by 2 by 2 bars are still in. They're just not in conjunction with each other. Now I have to move this, but I'm being blocked. All I have to do is take a look at where I'm being blocked and RIDIRD it until they're coordinated to where they're not blocking anyone. Let's turn this upside down and see what happens. Okay, now this is able to turn. This one is already able to turn too. So I turn it in, and now I've got this. Now is that all I need? Well, it just so happens this doesn't belong here, but it looks like these two pieces together constitute a 2 by 2 by 2 by 2 block. So now I can move this down to here. Turn, turn, and turn. So notice we're not in the proper alignment, but all things have been placed in. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn this in. Again, it's not necessary at this point, but it just demonstrates what we've done. What we've done is we have the bottom side here, but all that really means is we put in all of our individual 1 by 2 by 2 blocks. So this piece here, I'm sorry, 2 by 2 by 2 by 2 blocks. This piece here is a 2 by 2 by 2 block. These collectively here are a 2 by 2 by 2 block. These three, or these 1, 2, 3, 4, these 4 pieces here are a 2 by 2 by 2 block, and these two are a 2 by 2 by 2 block. So now in true AI style, I've got to do the top part.